July 10, 1985. Auckland Harbor, New Zealand. Just before midnight, a Greenpeace ship called Rainbow Warrior sat peacefully docked at the pier. The ship was preparing to sail toward French nuclear test sites in the Pacific. At 11:38 p.m., a massive explosion ripped through the hull. Water flooded the engine room. Crew members scrambled to evacuate. 12 minutes later, a second explosion tore the ship apart. A photographer trapped below deck drowned. By morning, the ship had sunk. New Zealand police investigated what looked like terrorism. But the truth, when it finally emerged, was far worse. This wasn't an act of terror. It was an act of state. French intelligence had bombed a civilian vessel in a friendly nation's harbor, killing an innocent man. This is the story of Operation Satanique, the intelligence operation that destroyed France's credibility, exposed the dark side of covert action, and proved that even allies can become enemies when nuclear secrets are at stake. The summer of 1985 was the final phase of the Cold War. But global tension wasn't just between Washington and Moscow. There was another battlefield, the Pacific Ocean. Since 1966, France had been conducting nuclear weapons tests at the Mururoa and Fangatofa atolls in French Polynesia. By 1985, France had carried out more than 150 nuclear detonations in the region. These tests were critical for three reasons. First, military independence. Despite being a NATO ally, France wanted its own nuclear deterrent. Charles de Gaulle's doctrine of independent France required possessing nuclear weapons capability without dependence on any other nation. Second, geopolitical prestige. Possessing nuclear weapons legitimized France's permanent seat on the UN Security Council and its status as a global superpower. Third, technological superiority. Each test improved the accuracy, efficiency, and destructiveness of warheads. France was particularly focused on miniaturizing thermonuclear warheads. But these tests came at a cost: environmental catastrophe. Nuclear explosions at Mururoa Atoll were destroying coral reefs. Radioactive leaks were contaminating Pacific fish stocks. Local Polynesian communities complained of rising cancer rates, and Greenpeace was determined to show this to the world. Greenpeace was an international environmental organization founded in Canada in 1971. Its mission was simple: document and stop environmental destruction. And in 1985, Greenpeace's target was French nuclear testing. In June 1985, Greenpeace docked its ship Rainbow Warrior at Auckland Harbor. The plan was to sail to Mururoa Atoll in July, enter the test zone, and document French nuclear explosions with cameras. To Greenpeace, this was a protest action. To France, this was a national security threat. In May 1985 at DGSE, Direction Générale de la Sécurité Extérieure, headquarters in Paris, France's Foreign Intelligence Service held an urgent meeting. At the table, DGSE Director Admiral Pierre Lacoste and Defense Minister Charles Hernu. Agenda: Rainbow Warrior. France faced a dilemma. If the Greenpeace ship reached Mururoa, activists would photograph a nuclear test explosion. These images would be broadcast in world media, international public pressure would increase, and France might be forced to halt the tests. But halting the tests would set France's nuclear modernization program back 5 to 10 years. This meant billions of francs lost in military budget. What was the alternative? DGSE presented three options. Option 1, diplomatic pressure. Ask the New Zealand government to prevent the Greenpeace ship from leaving port. But New Zealand followed an anti-nuclear policy and opposed French tests. This option had a high probability of failure. Option 2, naval blockade. Have the French Navy establish a cordon around Mururoa. But this would mean interfering with a civilian vessel in international waters, which was a violation of international law. Option 3, covert sabotage. Sink the ship while in New Zealand. The crew escapes. The ship becomes unusable. The Mururoa voyage is cancelled. Defense Minister Charles Hernu approved Option 3, but a critical mistake was made here. This operation was viewed as one of DGSE's routine sabotage missions. No one asked the question, what if we get caught? The operation was given a code name: Operation Satanique, Operation Satanic. Admiral Lacoste assigned 3 teams to execute the operation. Team 1, Reconnaissance Team, go to Auckland, monitor Rainbow Warrior, identify security vulnerabilities. Team 2, Sabotage Team, combat divers to place limpet mines. Team 3, Logistical Support, rent a yacht, provide fake identities, plan escape route. At the end of May 1985, the operation began. Team 1, Reconnaissance, the fake couple. June 1985, Auckland. A Swiss couple named Alain and Sophie Cheringe arrived in New Zealand for a tourist trip. They rented a camper van. They visited Hobbiton. They went to thermal springs in Rotorua. But Alain and Sophie Cheringe didn't exist. Their real names were Major Alain Maffart and Captain Dominique Pereira, DGSE agents. Their mission: monitor Rainbow Warrior, assess the ship's security level, and determine the best time for sabotage. Throughout June, Maffart and Pereira photographed Rainbow Warrior at Auckland Harbor every day. They recorded crew movements. They noted when the ship was left alone at the pier. According to their report, the ship was not under 24-hour surveillance. Harbor security was minimal. After 11 p.m., there were almost no people at the pier. Approaching the ship's hull from the water was possible. The report was sent to Paris. DGSE decided to proceed with the operation. Team 2, Combat Divers. The Otufi III Yacht. July 1985, Pacific. From New Caledonia, French colony, a private sailing yacht named Otufi III set sail toward Auckland. Captain Gerard Royal, fake name. Crew, 3 people. But this crew was actually elite combat divers from the French Navy. In the yacht's hold, 2 limpet mines, magnetic underwater bombs, diving equipment, timers, and underwater navigation devices. Otufi III entered New Zealand territorial waters on July 7th, officially registered as a tourist cruiser. On the night of July 8th, the yacht anchored in a bay outside Auckland. The divers received final operation instructions. Target: place 2 limpet mines on Rainbow Warrior's hull. Timing: first bomb to detonate at 11:30 am to warn crew plus time for evacuation. Second bomb at 11:50 am to sink the ship. Escape route: after placing the mines, divers return to yacht. Yacht heads to open sea and goes to French Polynesia. On the evening of July 9th, Otufi III began waiting 3 miles off Auckland Harbor, executing the sabotage. July 10th, 1985, 10 p.m. A Zodiac boat was lowered from Otufi III. Inside, 2 DGSE combat divers, codenames Diver 1 and Diver 2. Both wore black diving suits, rebreather systems, closed circuit, leaves no air bubbles, and carried magnetic limpet mines. The Zodiac advanced toward Auckland Harbor in darkness. At 10:45 p.m., the divers came within 200 meters of Rainbow Warrior. They entered the water. At 11:15 p.m., Divertu 1 placed the first limpet mine on the ship's stern. The mine magnetically attached to the hull's metal surface. Timer set to 11:38 p.m. At 11:25 p.m., Divertu placed the second mine underneath the engine room. Timer set to 11:50 p.m. Everything was going according to plan. The divers silently emerged from the water and boarded the Zodiac. Engines started. They fled toward open sea. At 11:38 p.m., the first explosion occurred. On Rainbow Warrior, that night there were 12 crew members. Most were on deck discussing the next day's voyage to Murara. At 11:38 p.m., a massive explosion from the ship's stern shocked everyone. The ship shook, glass shattered, alarm systems began ringing. Captain Peter Wilcox immediately gave the evacuation order. Everyone on deck, now. The crew rushed to deck, wearing life jackets. The ship's stern was taking on water, but the ship was still upright. Several crew members thought, maybe just one explosion, maybe an electrical accident. But below the ship, the second mine continued its countdown. At 11:50 p.m., the second explosion occurred, this time directly under the engine room. The explosion was so powerful that it tore a massive hole in the ship's hull. Water filled the engine room within seconds, and at this moment, tragedy struck. Fernando Pereira, a 35-year-old Portuguese-Dutch photographer, had joined Rainbow Warrior to document the Moruya tests for Greenpeace. When the first explosion happened, he had gone up to deck, but before the second explosion, he went back to his cabin to get his camera equipment. When the second explosion occurred, Fernando was still in the cabin. Water rapidly filled the corridors. Fernando couldn't find an exit. Doors locked from water pressure. Fernando Pereira drowned inside Rainbow Warrior. At 12:10 a.m., the ship had completely sunk. When New Zealand police arrived at Auckland Harbor at 1 a.m., only Rainbow Warrior's mast was visible above water, and on the pier there was a body bag. Inside was Fernando Pereira's body. This was no longer a sabotage incident. This was murder. First 24 hours, terrorism or state operation. New Zealand police began the investigation as a terrorist attack. Initial hypothesis: a radical anti-environmental group had targeted Greenpeace, but the first evidence told a different story. Evidence 1. Limpet mines. Explosive experts found remnants of magnetic sabotage bombs on the ship's hull. These types of bombs were used by military divers, not amateur terrorists. Evidence 2. Timer. The two bombs exploding 12 minutes apart showed professional planning. First bomb to warn crew, second bomb to sink the ship. Evidence 3. Zodiac trail. Harbor security cameras showed a black Zodiac approaching the ship at 10:45 p.m., but the boat disappeared into darkness. Police asked a question: who could be a group with access to military equipment and motivation to target Greenpeace? The answer was clear: France. The fake tourists' mistake. On the morning of July 11th, New Zealand police began investigating all vehicle rental companies in Auckland. One company reported an interesting detail. A Swiss couple returned their camper van on the evening of July 9th, but the vehicle smelled of seawater, and there were traces of wet diving equipment in the back seat. Police found the Swiss couple, Alain and Sophie Turange. On July 12th, police questioned the couple in their Auckland hotel room. When their passports were checked, suspicious details emerged. Minos, Swiss passports appeared newly issued, unused. Passport numbers didn't exist in the Swiss database. Fake. The couple had no marriage certificates. Credit cards were linked to a bank in Paris. When police investigated deeper, they found the truth. Alain Turange, Major Alain Maffat, DGSE, Sophie Turange, Captain Dominique Prieur, DGSE. On July 13th, Maffat and Prieur were arrested. Trial of a Tufi III. Simultaneously, the New Zealand Navy detected a suspicious yacht off Auckland, a Tufi III. The yacht was speeding toward Norfolk Island, Australian territory. New Zealand requested help from Australia. The Australian Navy stopped and inspected a Tufi III found on the yacht. Combat diver suits, wet. Limpet mine fragments, empty. French Navy equipment. The yacht crew was interrogated. The captain finally confessed, "We are French agents. We received operation orders from DGSE." There was no doubt now. France had bombed Rainbow Warrior. Initial response: denial. July 14, 1985, French National Day. France issued an official statement. France has nothing to do with the Rainbow Warrior incident. Those arrested in New Zealand may be rogue agents, but the evidence was too clear. Fake passports, French military equipment, DGSE agents. On July 20th, New Zealand Prime Minister David Lang sent an official note to Paris. France has committed an act of state terrorism on the soil of an allied nation. We expect a full explanation and apology. France remains silent. Internal pressure. French journalists step in. In August 1985, French newspaper Le Monde published a bombshell story. DGSE agents confessed to sabotage. The newspaper had access documents leaked from within DGSE. The documents contained detailed plans for Operation Satanique, Defense Minister Charles Hernu's signature, Admiral Lacoste's approval, sabotage team's code names. French public opinion was shocked. Our government bombed a civilian ship? Prime Minister's confession. September 22, 1985, French Prime Minister Laurent Fabius made a statement on national television. The agents acted under orders from the French government. The operation was authorized for national security reasons. We deeply regret Fernando Pereira's death. This confession destroyed France's international reputation. Political consequences. Defense Minister Charles Hernu resigned. DGSE Director Admiral Lacoste removed from office September 22nd. Maffat and Pereira tried in New Zealand court, both sentenced to 10 years imprisonment for manslaughter. But France applied diplomatic pressure. In 1986, New Zealand signed an agreement with France. Maffat and Pereira would be transferred to a military base in French Polynesia and serve 3 years of imprisonment there. Result? Both agents returned to Paris within 2 years and received promotions. Diplomatic consequences. France-New Zealand relations collapsed. Diplomatic relations were suspended until 1987. Pacific nations turned their backs on France. Australia, Fiji, Vanuatu condemned French nuclear tests. Greenpeace became a global symbol. The Rainbow Warrior incident became an icon of environmental activism. The Rainbow Warrior bombing is one of the worst blowback examples in modern intelligence history. Because the operation was technically successful, the ship sank. The Mororoa voyage was cancelled, but strategically, it was a complete disaster. Today, this operation is the source of 3 critical lessons. 1. The secondary effect risk of covert action. DGSE only planned to sink a ship, but they didn't account for mine. Someone might die. Row sabotage becomes murder. Agents might be caught, becomes undeniable. Media might get involved, becomes global scandal. Modern reflection. In 2018, Saudi Arabia planned the Khashoggi killing as a clean operation, but Turkey's audio recordings exposed everything. Result: diplomatic disaster. 2. Operation on Allied soil, sovereignty violation. France viewed New Zealand as an insignificant island nation. They thought, even if caught, we can handle it with diplomatic pressure. But New Zealand defended its sovereignty. They arrested the agents, tried them, imprisoned them. Modern lesson: intelligence services are now much more careful about operations on Allied soil, because getting caught can end alliances. 3. Environmental activism. RET became global power. The Rainbow Warrior incident made Greenpeace a globally recognized brand. Before, Greenpeace, who are they? After, the ship France bombed, the brave activists. Modern reflection: climate activism is a global movement today, and Rainbow Warrior is a symbol of this movement. On the night of July 10, 1985, France placed a bomb on a ship. Goal: prevent a protest. Result: a man died. 2 agents were arrested. 2 ministers resigned. Decades of diplomatic relations collapsed. Operation Satanique is remembered as one of the worst decisions in intelligence history because it showed covert action isn't just about succeeding or failing. There must also be an answer to what happens if we get caught. And if the answer is scandal, resignations, diplomatic crisis, the operation is flawed from the start. Today, every intelligence service asks this question when planning operations: could this be our Rainbow Warrior? Because history has taught us, some operations are far more expensive than succeeding. This story shows the dark side of covert operations. If you're amazed by how an operation, a decision, a bomb turned into an international scandal, subscribe. Because history's greatest mistakes weren't made on the battlefields you see, but in the intelligence rooms you don't. Tell us in the comments, have modern intelligence services learned from Rainbow Warrior, or are similar mistakes still being made?